Good morning, everyone. My name is Yogesh Chavda. I'm the founder of Y2S Consulting, and I'm also a faculty member at the University of South Carolina, where I'm also the director for the Center for Marketing Solutions. As you know, I've been doing this podcast for literally 12 months. So this is my 1 year anniversary of this podcast. So I'm really excited that I've reached that milestone. But most importantly, I'm super excited to have Winston Li, CEO of Arima, here on the podcast today to talk about synthetic data. So, without further ado, I would like to first introduce Winston. Winston, welcome to the show.
Hey, everybody. And hi, Yogesh. Great to meet you.
Thanks for joining us today. Before we get into the conversation on synthetic data, I thought we'd first start off by having you introduce yourself and tell us who you are, what do you do, and how did you land on this whole concept of synthetic data in the context of marketing?
Yeah, for sure. Great to be here. And Of course, thanks very much for the invite. And great to be speaking and connecting with everyone. My name is Winston. I'm the founder of Arima. Uh, in a little bit, of course, we'll get into sort of the discussion of what we do, but essentially, we focus on building synthetic data. Um, I, I started my career as a data scientist. I'm a data guy by training. That's where my educational background is, as well as most of my sort of professional career. Uh, I spent quite a few years at Omnicom running marketing science. So I was at Omnicom Canada, and I serviced a lot of the agencies within Omnicom. And One of the things I learned there is how data is being applied to solve marketing problems, and a lot of problems that may look trivial or easy, it actually isn't. There's quite a number of things going on behind the scenes.
Hmm.
After that, I went over to PwC, and I again ran consulting. Most of my focus is still around marketing analytics, consumer analytics, um, and and I spent some time there. So with both of these organizations, one of the challenges, as you can see, both of these are essentially professional service organizations. We provide services to other clients, and they're generally pretty big clients.
Hmm.
And so when you deal with big clients, one of the challenges that will inevitably come up is you have lots of data. They license 10 different databases. They have their first party data. You as an organization, you have some data. When you work with five of these clients, basically the amount of data you collect or you have access to, gets multiplied by five.
Yeah.
So an interesting question becomes, how do we all piece them all together? Obviously, you can't just take data sets from every client and start stitching them together, because nobody will allow you to do that. And sort of legally, nobody will allow you to do that. But also, from a technical standpoint, that's also very difficult to do, because
Mhm.
most of these data sets come to us in a somewhat anonymized fashion, and even if they're not anonymized, um, uh, matching becomes very difficult. Some of them may have names. People may have different names, different emails.
Mhm.
People will move from time to time, and they'll have different addresses. So how do you, kind of join data together? And that was a really big challenge, because if you couldn't join data sets together, then the insights or the information that you can get is always in some ways univariate. If I'm a client, I know 10 things about my customers. These are the 10 things I'll ever know about them. There's a whole, people do a whole lot more things,
Mhm.
than interacting with your brand. And if you can't somehow, you know, find what they do outside of your brand and somehow all connect them together, then you're missing a lot on getting the right information. So this is where the idea of synthetic data came in. And we'll get to that a little later, but
Mhm.
essentially, synthetic data focuses on not using computer algorithms to create data sets based on a real data set. So there's a real data set. I can't use it, but no problem. I can train a model on it. The model
Mhm.
can learn all the important information and then simulate a synthetic copy uh, that contains all the nice, useful information, but is differentially private. So it's not the same as our original data set. So
Right.
that's really the motivation. The motivation being, how do we find a good way to connect multiple data sets in a privacy safe way, and to help people get the most information out of it?
So let's take for example, one client, e client. You don't have to mention any names or
Yeah,
anything, but
sure,
so they've given you access to say 5 or 10 or 15 different data sets. Like you said, you bring them together, you stitch the data together, and now suddenly you have a broader set of data that's available, right? So let's start with the very basics first, because this is most people don't understand what synthetic data even means just yet, right? So
sure.
there's a bit of an educational component we have to do here. So why don't we start by explaining what is synthetic data? What does that mean? And how do we even generate that kind of information? So if you could just start with that question first.
Yeah, for sure. So, synthetic data basically means they're data sets that are not collected through real world events, but rather generated through a computer algorithm. So traditionally, when we get data set, we would be collecting them through surveys. Maybe someone registers on your website and you ask them to fill out, a questionnaire. That's how, many years ago, that's how basically data sets were created.
Yeah.
Then you started to have apps, and then apps were all sorts of tracking. You could track people's mobility, you could track people's internet viewing history, you could track people's purchase pattern, you could track all these different things. So people are not actively giving their information to you, but you're still inferring a lot of things based on their activities. uh,
Mhm.
this is what we call real data set, or non-synthetic data set. But more recently, people have discovered, well, there's actually a different way of creating data sets where, uh, if we have enough real data sets, we can build a model, and the model will learn patterns from these real data sets and create similar copies of data sets that are not exactly the same, but contains all the nice and useful properties. So one
Mhm.
of the examples you may know is, you know, uh, I'm sure everybody has seen, is these generated artificial faces, the generative adversarial networks out there, where it gets trained on a lot of people's faces, and then it generates more faces, and they all look like very, very real people, but it's not anybody on the planet. So you wouldn't be able to actually look at a synthetically generated face and say, oh, this is Michael, this is Bob, this is Lisa, this is so and so. But at the same time, those are actually real faces, and they tell you a lot of information. They tell you about how people would look, how people would facial features and so on. So
Mhm.
that is a form of synthetic data. And um, in a nutshell, synthetic data basically means that they're computer generated data sets, but from a statistical perspective, these data sets are close replicas of real data sets. So they contain all the nice statistical properties, like the means, the standard deviations, the correlations, and so on.
Mhm.
They're all
Mhm.
similar to our original data set.
So a common question I get asked, on this topic is, why even do that? What's the value of doing that? What is your response to that question?
For sure. Synthetic data brings a couple of advantages. A couple of advantages. The first and foremost, and I think the biggest value, is privacy. So,
Mhm.
um, again, I'll use the example of synthetically generated faces, because when we were
Mhm.
talking about pictures and faces, it's usually a little easier for people to understand.
Yeah.
Um, there may be certain situations where you can't use anyone's real photos, because they don't give you permission to do that. But when you take a synthetically generated photo of someone's face, you could use that for many more purposes than using anybody's real identity or real faces, because that synthetically generated picture doesn't correspond to anybody. It's not the property. It's you're not infringing anybody's privacy, so to say, by using that picture. So
Mhm.
same kind of idea with data. When you have data sets, let's say if you have a bank and you have lots of customer data, and maybe you're sharing that data set with somebody else, maybe you're sharing that with a different department. There's all sorts of rules around how that data can be used, who gets access to it, what sort of anonymization needs to be done.
Mhm.
But synthetic data can bypass all of that. So we take this data set, we generate a copy, a copy that's similar in statistical sense, but not exactly the same in row by row comparison sense. Now we can take this synthetic data and use it for other purposes because they don't correspond to the original data set. They don't trace back to any original customers.
Okay,
So
so
privacy is definitely, sorry, go ahead.
no, no, please finish your thought. Finish your thought.
Yeah, so privacy is definitely a big part of it. The other part of it is it reduces the cost of data collection. So it
Mm,
might cost you a lot of money to collect data through traditional means like surveys, but if you can combine the two, if you can collect some data through traditional means and then synthetically generate similar copies, then you've essentially brought down your cost of data acquisition. So this is the second benefit. And the third and the last benefit would be synthetic data because there's modeling involved. It allows you to um, join data sets in an easier way. So, for example, you
mm,
may have one data set, let's say 100 people completed that on people's healthcare patterns, and you have a different data set where you have another 100 people responded, and that's on people's financial patterns. Now, you want to know how people's finances impact their health or their health impact their finance.
mhm.
Um, you would need information from both sets. Now, if you didn't have a synthetic data set, you'd have to basically match these data sets, and your 100 from here may not match very well with your 100 here, and you end up with a data sparsity problem. You may end up with one or two people that match, and that's you can't do anything with that. But synthetic data also bypasses that because we're dealing with modeling, we're dealing with about learning patterns. So you could say, have a model that learns some patterns from this set data set and learns some patterns about these data sets. Models can then get brought together, and then we can use the model to which have learned sort of patterns from both sides of the equation, and have that model generate more copies of people that have both financial patterns and healthcare patterns.
Amazing. So, so that is something that I don't think a lot of people understand. I think people start, can wrap their heads around the whole thing around privacy and the fact that you can generate at a lower price. All those things. People intuitively can probably get. But what you said at the end about the modeling part, that's very unique, right? That synthetic data can only do, right? And you can combine different data
For
sets to
sure.
create new information, basically. Um,
For sure.
so because it requires modeling and there's algorithms and assumptions potentially even that go into the development of those models, could you speak about that a little bit in terms of how do you even assess or evaluate what's the right algorithm to help generate synthetic data?
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's a very good question. So one of the most common questions we get asked by people is, okay, you have some synthetic data. How do I know it's accurate? How do I know it's even the right thing?
Yeah.
Uh, and here I'll just segue into a little bit of, and talk a little bit about our product first, so people have more context in terms of what we talk about. So
Yeah.
within synthetic data, uh, there are lots of players, and people work with all sorts of data sets. So we have people working with synthetic images, for example, like generating photos, people working with synthetic videos, generating videos, text. Our focus specifically is on consumer data. So we focus on generating synthetic data about customers, customer behaviors, customer interests, social demographics, media consumptions, finance, healthcare, all of that kind of. And the data product that we create is called the synthetic society. Synthetic because it's synthetic society, sorry, it's synthetic data, and society because it's built to mimic the real society. So just like I said, how synthetic data, the ultimate goal is to mimic some real data set. For us, our real data set is the population. And of course, nobody will ever be able to sample the whole entire population, whole entire planet.
Mm,
So that's where synthetic data comes in. Now, back to your question, a lot of people will ask us, hey, how do we know your data is right? Like,
mhm.
you claim to have this population data set that's synthetically generated. So how do we know? Like, how do we know that's the right information, right? Like, how do we know your data is accurate? Uh, One of the things people could validate synthetic data is by comparing it against uh, your real data set. Remember, synthetic data set is built to mimic the real data set, so there's always something you can compare to. So, for
Mhm.
example, we start off with a survey. Again, I'll use the finance example. we start with a real survey. That survey will come from a credible source. Maybe it comes from Nielsen, Kantar, Ipsos, whatever, somebody that we trust. And we take that data set, we create a synthetic copy of it, which is larger. Think of it as something that's extrapolated to the population.
Mm-hmm.
Now we take our population synthetic data and we compare with the source. So we'll say, we'll ask our synthetic data, we among, let's say, 20 to 24-year-old males that live in this state, what percentage of them do they own a credit card? Our synthetic data may say, 20% of them have a credit card. We need to go back to the raw data source, pull up the same group of people within the same area, same age group. We need to look at how many of them own a credit card. Maybe of
Mm-hmm.
the entire questionnaire, 50 people, within this age range living in this country responded to that question, of which, 10 of them responded to said they have a credit card. Now you can compute kind of a confidence range, and we need to make sure our synthetic data, the proportion of our synthetic data falls into that range. And this check is not done just on not once, not twice, but many, many times. So we segment our synthetic data into many, many small groups, compute their percentages, benchmark that against real society or the real data set. So in other words, our synthetic data is not necessarily inventing new things. They're all they're an enlarged version of the original data set, if you will. So they closely mimic the original data set, and our comparison is done by matching what we synthetically generated against where we started.
So, thank you for that. So, I think there's some misconceptions that are out there with people around what you just described. So, one common refrain I hear is that isn't this just overweighting the data from your original data set, and you're just overweighting the sample, and therefore that's why you're generating more data. But that's not what we're talking about here, are we?
That's right. It's not just a simple overweighting, because traditionally what people have done in market research is weighting, like very much like you said, all this group of the population, has a weight of 1.5, this group of
Mhm.
people have a weight of 0.7. That would be more of a traditional approach to weighting.
Mhm.
With synthetic data, mm, I mean, I guess if you think of it as some sort of machine learning supported weighting, that would be an okay explanation. I think
Mhm.
that's a decent way of thinking about it. But from a synthetic data perspective, it's not so much about let's calculate weights for different cohorts and let's apply these weights to these cohorts, but it's more about let's build a model to learn patterns from the data set, to learn the distributions of all these variables and how they correlate, how they distribute, and
Mhm.
taking that distribution and sampling from that distribution. So for example, in our synthetic society data sets for US and Canada, we have more than 50,000 attributes. So what we're doing essentially is having a machine learning model learn a 50,000 dimensional distribution, and based on that, simulate people from that distribution. So for
Yeah.
us, calculating the weights are less important. Calculating the true distribution of the population is more important.
Got it. So as you're describing it, like because you're looking at pattern recognition in a way, and that's really what you're talking about, right? And then taking those patterns, or for lack of a better word, even behavioral patterns, right? Um, and then generating data that mimics those behavioral patterns, or patterns in general. Um, Now that you have a broader data set, you can then basically identify, um, call it micro patterns that you would not have seen in your original data set. Is that a fair statement to make?
Yeah, yeah, that's a fair statement to me.
Okay, okay. And I think that's where people, need to kind of like wrap their heads around, because, it's not that synthetic data is new. It's been around for quite some time. It just happens to be new in the space of marketing, pretty much, right? So I think it's a matter of just understanding how do you actually apply it. So let's talk about use cases, because that's the other place where I think a lot of people, are falling into traps, in my opinion. Where they think, oh, synthetic data is supposed to replace traditional market research, and then it becomes a whole debate around, oh, is synthetic data good or bad for market research, and blah blah blah, right? I don't think that's what you're saying, right? When you describe synthetic data. So give us a sense of what kind of use cases do you work with? What do you see? What should you do and what should you not do with synthetic data? If you could just have that conversation.
Sure. Um, the purpose of synthetic data is not to replace anything. A lot of people have that misconception of, oh, there's synthetic data, there's my panel, or there's my traditional research. I'm either picking this or I'm picking that, and this replaces that or that replaces.
Yeah.
That's not the case. Synthetic data is here to enhance what what uh, what humans have collected or have developed. What a lot of people don't necessarily realize is if you take a tool like ChatGPT, that is synthetic data. It's data that's generated by a computer, right? It just so happens to be text, and most people don't think text is data, so they may not realize that. But ChatGPT is a form of synthetic data, and ChatGPT is doing nothing more than taking different books. There's many books, many documents that people have written, learning patterns about them, so
Mhm.
that it may answer a question based on many of these sources rather than any single source. So it's able to merge many of the information from different sources together.
Mhm.
Same thing with what we're doing here. So synthetic data is not here to replace traditional market research. It is simply a way to supplement research. Supplement research in two sense. In one sense, in one sense of bringing costs down. So we don't, maybe before you have to sample, 10,000 people to reach a significant level. Now you could do it with 5,000 and then, synthetically create the rest. So
Mhm.
that cuts your cost down. So, cost saving is one sense, but also, being able to, uh, bring together different study from different times, different geographies, different, population subsets, and join that together. There's actually a term in statistics, I believe people call it meta-analysis, where you
Mhm.
have many different analyses and you do an analysis on an analysis on analyses.
Yeah.
So, synthetic data creation is a form of meta-analysis, if you will. Coming to the use case side, what do people do with with synthetic data? Um, Obviously, depending on what data you're talking about, whether you're talking about synthetic text, synthetic video, synthetic images, the applications are different. So I'm only talking about the applications that we deal with.
Yeah.
Um, you know, a big application for us is the ability to bring first party data and third party data together. So very often customers come to us and they'll say, uh, we have a list of customers through our CRM database, or we've done a study somewhere, and we contracted a market research company, and they asked 10 questions or they asked 12 questions. We'd like to know more about these people. So can we bring our data set to your synthetic society data set?
Mhm.
So now instead of knowing 12 things about this person who's being surveyed, we know 50,000 plus 12 things about them. And that's one major use case.
Mhm.
Another major use case is around understanding prospects. So for anybody, whether you're a bank, you're a telco, you're anybody, um, your customer base is always limited. Only a portion of the country uses your service or product, and you're always out there looking for new services and products. So how do I find these customers? Where are they? What are the things they do? Um, I don't have any data on them. So synthetic data, and my current customer might be my prospect might be a current customer of my competitor, and
Mhm.
obviously I can't get anything from my competitor. They're not going to tell me anything. So synthetic data becomes a way to access some information that I would not otherwise be able to get. So that's another use case. And moreover, um, agent-based modeling as sort of a broad category is something you can do with synthetic data. So running models on this simulated population, again, without privacy or missing data challenges. So a lot of customers may ask questions like, um, what if I open a store in this area? Which of the customers are going to visit? What if I launch a media campaign spending, $500,000, in this area against this group of people? How many of them do I reach? How many times do I reach? What's my coverage? What's my expected sales, etc.? So a lot of a lot of simulations can be done on synthetic data set as well.
So, first, that's amazing, right? So that's an area which I think everybody has talked about in terms of, oh, I wish I could answer this what if question. And for most marketing or market researchers, they tend to switch to, oh, let me go do a survey and like do a concept test or do something that is going to give me some sort of prediction capability, of, where you're benchmarking versus some sort of database or whatever to say, oh, this packaging is great, or this concept is great, or this new product is going to be, is going to be successful in the marketplace, whatever. But you can't really simulate that per se.
That, yeah.
But synthetic data gives you that option to do that if you build the models out, basically, is what I'm hearing you say.
Correct. Yeah, we have some current customers today
Mm-hmm.
that run all sorts of simulations on if I have a store here, if I close this store and move it to there,
Yeah.
how is that going to impact my sales? Or this is my current budget. If
Mm-hmm.
I double my budget, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to my sales? What's going to happen to my reach? What's going to happen to et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of people doing that. There's also people suggesting uh, simulations like if you're a CPG and you're launching a new product or a new branding or a new packaging, if I do this versus if I do that, how are my target customers going to react? And obviously, if you want to make such calculations, you need to know, okay, these are my customers, these are their psychographics beliefs, these are their incomes, these are the
Mm-hmm.
things that they care about, and based on that, you can draw a lot of conclusions. So yes, it's like a little lab of the real world, and people can run different tests on it for sure.
Do you feel that a company, obviously a lot of people would be interested in this, but I think, the first barrier that might become an issue in people's minds is that, oh, this must be a very expensive exercise to do, to go build out a simulation tool with synthetic data, and it's very, very expensive, several $100,000, and therefore people just don't move forward. What, without getting into like, specifics, what are we talking about in terms of, starting off in this kind of space? Are we talking about like a several hundred thousand or $1 million investment, or are we talking about, tens of thousands of dollars investment and you can get started? What ballpark are we in, basically?
Yeah, yeah. Technology is making things very cheap these days, and cheap doesn't mean bad. I mean,
Yeah.
it's good. It's just more affordable, so to say. And this is exactly what we're seeing with synthetic data. Um,
Mhm.
yes, for a company, like if you're a company, if there isn't any service providers, if you're a company and you have to start off with sourcing data, developing synthetic data generation algorithms, and maintaining your data set, that if you do it all by yourself, yes, that will cost a lot of money. But there are people that specialize in that kind of thing. Like take us as an example, we specialize in maintaining a synthetic society data set. So we
Mhm.
have a synthetic society data set that's built, that's ready to go, that where we're sourcing the right data sets, where we're updating it on an annual or biannual basis, that we pick the right countries and it's a global product. So we do that already. And for people who want to jump on the service, it's very, very affordable. Some of our large clients, they go to us and they just license our data set. They'll buy our synthetic society data set, and then their enterprise analytics team will use it for modeling for whatever purposes. That's
Mhm.
the larger clients. We have some mid-sized clients, like 20 people, marketing agencies, for example. They'll
Mhm.
license our UI and they'll license the tool. And within the tool, they can just click buttons and run some analysis. We also have some even smaller client who can't afford that, and maybe for just a few thousand, as low as a few $1,000s, they can buy they can buy some insights. They can buy some one-time access, and just get their questions addressed, and then see if that's the right way to go.
Mhm.
So we tailor our product to all kinds of companies of all sizes,
Mhm.
and we make access we make it more affordable for people with all kinds of budgets to benefit from synthetic data.
So you talked about the synthetic society, right? And you started getting into, the fact that you can do a lot with that. So let's spend some time talking about that specifically now. So you've got this these data sets built out basically with, through multiple sources. You've generated synthetic data. Give us a sense of the foundational data that you've got, the synthetic data that you've generated, and how does it work? So if I'm a client and if I wanted to come and work with you, like, explain to me, what would you be sharing with me?
Sure. So, and our synthetic society data set is organized by country. I'll take US and Canada as an example because those are the two countries that are, sort of uh, most mature,
Hmm.
let's say. Um, within each of these markets, we typically get data sets from 3 or 4 types of sources. There are what we call public data, so things like the census, government publications, uh, point of interests, location stores, and parks and government buildings and so on. So these are boundaries. These are public data sets. We have data sets that we license. So these are typically market research data sets. Market research firms provide that. They do their study. They sell their data sets to us. So there's that. And then we also have tracking based data. So things like mobility, things like cart transactions, you know, uh, media viewership, all of that. Uh, we have 25 different data sources for Canada now, and about 10, 12 for the US. We started in Canada first, so that's why we have a little more in Canada. But both markets are very mature, and it's based on these sources that we build our population. So for each of the two countries, even just us alone, we have 50,000, around 50,000 attributes for every person in the country. So already you can imagine it's a very detailed database covering, all kinds of sort of every aspect of your life, so to
Hmm.
say, every aspect of everyone's life. So a lot of our customers already find it enough for what it is that they're doing. And if that's the case, they can just take whatever it is that we have and start using that.
Hmm.
We also have customers uh, that bring some of their own data sets in, very specialized. If you look at the sources that we're getting our data from, it all tends to be a little generic, like market research. People tend to ask more questions at the category level rather than, or at the brand level rather than at the specific, maybe product level. So if you're a CPG, you may have, through us, you might be able to get things like, this person goes to Walmart, this person goes to Costco, this person goes to so and so, but you may have your own study on this person buys the 6-pack, this person buys the 4-pack, this person buys this flavor versus this flavor, and they can bring that in as well.
Hmm.
So it becomes a very rich data set, and with lots of things in there. Um, we also have international data now available for 53 countries and markets. So it's a very useful thing that people could use as a standalone product or customize for their own needs.
So, do you also then offer the modeling capabilities too? So, okay, there's the data that's been generated through your organization, right? That's one part of the puzzle. The second part is the modeling. So,
Yeah,
how does that part work? I'm just curious.
for sure. We can support with modeling as well if the client needs us to do that.
Hmm.
So, so if some of our clients are highly technically sophisticated, they're data scientists, they're PhDs, and they know,
Hmm.
they build models all day, so they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They come to us, they just buy data, and that gets dumped into their cloud, their servers, and then they can do whatever with it they want.
Hmm.
We also have clients that look to us for custom solutions, and typically these are the clients that are looking to uh, that have a specific business problem, and they don't have the data, and they also don't have the technical expertise.
Hmm.
So let me give you an example. We have one of the groups that we're engaging with is a golf course, is a franchise of many 40 or 50 golf courses, and
Hmm.
one of the questions they ask us is, we'd like to know, of all our members, where are they before they come to our golf courses? Where do they go after? Do they go
Hmm.
shop? Do they go to the gym? Do they go swim? Do they they go back home? Do they go to restaurants? What do they do? And how long do they stay on the golf course? Are we talking about hours? Are we talking about full day? Are we talking about half a day? That's the business question they present us. In addressing that business challenge, there's two sides. One, you need the data,
Mhm.
which of course, we have the synthetic society data set, and they can mix that in with their customer data, with their customer list. But at the same time, someone needs to do that analysis. Somebody needs to actually look into the data, build a model, extract the right information to figure out, okay, people are here before, people are here after, and
Mhm.
this location is a restaurant, this location is a grocery store, this location, and so on and so on. So there's also that analysis piece. And if the client needs, we can also do that. So
Mhm.
we help our clients in every possible way that we can.
Got it. So when you talk about this volume of data that you've got, there's a degree of precision that comes with that as well. So are clients also looking for that degree of precision, or could you just give a sense? Because I could easily say, oh, that's a survey thing that you just described. Why wouldn't you just run a survey and you can get your answers? And isn't that good enough? So why come to synthetic data when you could have just done a survey? I'm just curious.
For sure. First of all, synthetic data are survey based. So again, we're not saying
Yeah.
surveys are, synthetic data here is to replace surveys. It is simply
Yeah.
to enhance surveys. So the two things do come in hand in hand. One of the things that you know uh, uh, clients find value from synthetic data is the fact that there are a lot of data points in there already that you can use, and you may not know one variable impacts another until you actually run the analysis. And this is where
Mhm.
this is something you cannot do with the survey.
Got it.
Let me give you another example.
Yeah.
We have a client, and they're a telco company, and they have lots of members on their phone plans, and they're looking at building upsell models. Basically, they're looking at building a
Yeah.
model that scores all these customers and predicts, okay, this person is more likely to buy a tablet, this person is less likely to buy a tablet, this person is, so and so that they will only reach out to the ones that are most likely to buy a tablet. They don't, they call it poke the bear. Like, if you send too many messages to someone who's not interested, they may just unsubscribe. And then the moment they unsubscribe, you're never talking to them again.
Right.
So we're looking at building models. The client had about 50 variables for every customer, including what kind of a phone you have, how long is your plan, how much money you're paying for, and the typical things that your telco firm collects. And the client said, look, you've got so many variables, so why don't you bring that all into the modeling, and we'll run it against your variables, and we can see which variables impact tablet buying, which variables may impact tablet buying. And in the end, one of the things we found, one of the two things we found, I thought were really interesting, was that one, um, if people lived in a house, they're 3 or 4 times more likely to buy a tablet than if you lived in an apartment building. And our hypothesis was that if you lived in a house, it's typically multiple, you have many floors, and you like to keep an iPad on your second floor, another one on your first floor, so you don't have to walk up and down.
Mhm.
Whereas if you live in an apartment, your area is a little small, and you may just carry your phone around with you.
Yeah.
The other thing we also found was, for people with kids, they're 7 times more likely to buy a tablet than those without a kid, because they give the tablet to their kids. So these are things that you need the data first to run the analysis to then discover.
Mhm.
Whereas if you ran a survey, you may not know what questions to put, and
Mhm.
you would have missed out on the opportunity. So I think one of the biggest advantages of synthetic data, in particular a an already built large synthetic database, is it allows you to run different scenarios and then discover unknown, because the you don't know what you don't know, so to say.
Amazing. No, that's a great example, and I think this is where people, I think, need to you know um, come to terms with the fact that this is actually an enabler. Synthetic data is actually an enabler to do your work in a way that you could not do it in the past. You were guessing, or you were making assumptions or whatever. But there are limits that that come with traditional surveys and market research, but synthetic data actually allows you to go past those limits and do new things that you could not do in the past. So that's phenomenal. So moving a little bit further, one of the things that I've always wondered, and I was hoping you could give some clarity on, is that does synthetic data help level the playing field between large companies and small companies? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. Um, by customer headcount, I would say 70% of our customers, 75% of our customers are smaller players.
Okay.
What I mean by smaller players is that within their category, uh,
Mhm.
they're not sort of the first tier, the international brands and the
Mhm.
the leaders. The
Mhm.
reason why we often find people uh, like like customers like that coming to us is because they simply can't afford to have the tools that the larger companies or tools or data sets that the larger companies are having.
Mhm.
Let me give you an example. A lot of our customers are marketing agencies,
Mhm.
and we work with a lot of sort of mid-sized agencies that are not part of a global holding company, international many offices. And
Mhm.
the reason they come to us, we always ask them, why do you pick us? And one of the reasons they always say is, we don't have a New York office or we don't have a London office that's developing these tools and giving it to us. And we're small and we can't hire data scientists out there. We can't license all these data sets and just use it for one or two clients.
Mhm.
So they come to a solution provider like us to say, hey, you guys have the data, you guys have the software, you guys can also do managed service or do projects if we need. So that's perfect. That's perfect for us. So
Mhm.
I think that example, just goes to show that we're more of an enabler for smaller companies than for bigger organizations, at least the way we're structured today,
Mhm.
where smaller companies are picking up these weapons and then they can go head to head with bigger organizations, win pitches, and really grow their business. We've got a you know an agency here based in Canada. They've won three large clients. One is an international brand. One is a national leading you know
Mhm.
grocery brand. They've won many businesses just because of us. That they've now have this new technology equipped, and they are just as competitive as the big players, if not more.
Mhm.
So that just goes to show even the smaller players are looking at what the big guys are doing. They're looking at the latest technology. They just can't build it by themselves. But if there's something available built for them, they'll very quickly jump on it.
Amazing, amazing. That's a great example. So tell me about, one thing that you and I talked about, when we first met, you were talking about media mix modeling. That was a big area that you had found
Yeah.
where synthetic data was very applicable. I wanted to just spend a little bit of time just, talking about that too, because, we spent time talking about traditional market research, but we didn't spend time talking about media. So if you could just give an example or two in that space.
For sure. Um, one of the one of the major applications of our synthetic data today is in the space of media planning, media measurement.
Hmm.
Synthetic data is really good for that because um, in media, you know, people are often talk about audiences. I'm targeting, people who are 35 to 54, owning a dog, have this income, living in this area. People want to define a particular audience, and that's the audience they want to target. So synthetic data is the perfect use case for that because nobody would have enough first party data on every state, every region, every people with every type of interest.
Hmm.
So within the space of media planning and media measurement, and MMMs is a marketing mix models is a great tool. Um, it's a statistical model that help the advertisers understand this is my outcome. This is my outcome, such as sales, such as online visits, number of app downloads, whatever metric that's important to them. These are the factors that I spend money on. So these are the media channels, these are the promotions I ran, these are the coupons I've been giving out, uh, as well as data on the population. So, this is the group that I'm trying to target. These are their behaviors, these are their media consumption patterns, as well as things like macroeconomics.
Mhm.
Maybe there's a recession in this period and that's impacting my sales, or maybe the stock market went up and that's giving people more disposable income and they're spending more. Macroeconomic conditions may also affect my sales. So all of these factors get correlated together to make to predict your to model against your sales, your KPI, so to say. And that's what MMMs are designed for. So MMMs are tools that designed to both help the advertisers understand, here are 10 different factors, this one is the best, this one is the worst. And also moving forward, if I want to hit a target of X million sales next year, this is what I need to do, or this
Mhm.
is the optimal way that I need to do that. So
That's
yeah, so then MMM is a great tool that brings synthetic data, first party media,
mhm.
first party data, media spend, global macroeconomics, competitors, bringing all of these data sets together to help the advertisers create a model.
That's amazing. No, back. I'm going to date myself a little bit, but back in the days of when I worked at P&G, market mix modeling was just being introduced back in like 2003, 2004 timings, basically, and I was just so fascinated by the power of the tool back then. So I have no doubt that things have advanced dramatically since my time on it. But what you're describing, it makes complete sense to me, and you can actually close gaps of data that you may not have, right, with synthetic data, because you're simulating the data, and you can then start actually doing more scenario planning as well if you wanted to.
Right.
Like the example you gave
Yeah.
with, okay, if I have a revenue target to hit or a market share target to hit, what are my scenarios on how to get there, basically, with different spend models, basically.
Yeah,
So.
correct, exactly. And we're doing, our innovation comes in two fronts. One is on the data side. We have this synthetic data set that
Mhm.
makes data accessible really easy. So bringing the cost of data, like the barrier, you know, the cost barrier of acquiring data
Mhm.
down.
Yep.
But at the same time, we also have a software. We also have an interface, and that brings the sort of the technology, the modeling
Mhm.
barrier down as
Mhm.
well. MMMs are nothing new; they've existed since the '60s, and
Yep.
we're not, we didn't invent the MMM, nor did Google, nor did anybody who claimed that they invented MMMs, who do MMMs, can claim they invented the technology.
Yep.
However, back in the days, MMMs were extremely cumbersome. Like in my agency days, my team's job is to basically build MMMs,
Mhm.
and they costed a lot. They had like 6 month turnaround time and all these labors, all these hours embedded in them. So so that's a really long process, and from getting the data to getting the model to presenting. But now we're making innovations on the on the accessibility front as well, so that it's easy to use. Like anybody could just go in there, press some buttons, set it up,
Mhm.
use an interface, click a button, and the
Mhm.
model runs. So
Amazing.
that's also something that we bring forward to not only have the data set, but also help people use the data set in an easier way.
Fantastic. So Winston, I have to ask you this. You've been doing this for quite some time. Clearly you're an expert. You just, you gave us a master class right now on synthetic data in the last, 45, 50 minutes or so. What do you see is the next phase of synthetic data? Where is it going in the next 1 to 5 years, in your mind?
Yeah, for sure. Um, I think more and more people will pay attention to synthetic data going forward,
Hmm.
uh, because uh, privacy laws will only get more strict, not the other way.
Hmm.
So as people pay more and more attention about privacy, um, uh, any form of matching will become very difficult.
Hmm.
So, in the whether it's tracking by cookies, or getting
Hmm.
people's consent,
Hmm.
or what information can be shared with who, what's allowed, whether it's like explicit consent or sort of implied consent, all of these things will get tougher and tougher. And for both advertisers and data professionals, they'll you know synthetic data will be a serious alternative that people look at. So I think over the next 5 years, people will be much more serious about it today. And there are companies like us out there, sharing what synthetic data is, answering people's questions, and certainly, I think questions around all synthetic data is fake, or why is this accurate? Why can't I just do this?
Hmm.
Questions like that uh, uh, will, the market will be better educated to adopt the technology.
No, that's totally right. In fact, that was one of the reasons why I reached out to you in the first place, because I 6 months ago, I knew nothing about synthetic data. I knew it was coming, but I didn't know how to even wrap my head around it. And I found you on LinkedIn, and you graciously accepted my invitation to talk. And that's how you actually helped trigger and kick off my whole self discovery process. So
Great.
by saying that, what would you recommend to people on how to upskill themselves in this space around synthetic data? What would be like the two or three things you would want people to learn? So you already talked about, like, there's an awareness factor that would take away this
Yeah.
misperceptions, but from a skill set perspective, what do you think people should know and learn?
I think it depends a little bit on the person.
Yeah.
Um, if you're more sort of an executive type of, uh, you're in a more executive position. Uh, Nobody's going to expect you to get your hands dirty and write programs and start coding. Uh, but learning more about use cases is I think a great way. Uh,
Mhm.
we still have many customers that come to us and they'll say, "Oh, we've heard of synthetic data, and we think it's the right way to do things, but we don't know how to use it. Can you tell me how to use it? Can you tell me use cases? Can you tell me how synthetic data can benefit an organization like mine?"
Mhm.
So it's a little. I guess it's a little bit like Gen AI in some sense, and synthetic data is a form of Gen AI. Technically, I never use that term because everybody talks about Gen AI, so I don't want to be talking about it. But it is technically a form of Gen AI because we're not just
Mhm.
we're generating data, tabular data instead of pictures, images, videos, and text, which really to the computer is all just data sets. It's just all a bunch of zeros and ones, right? So
Yep, exactly.
again, the same, I think we'll face a lot of the similar challenges as Gen AI, where people are happily investing, but they don't know where that thing lands in their organization. So I think that's where a lot of the learning should be. And for practitioners like us in this space,
Mhm.
it's our job to educate the market, to let people know here are some cool use cases, here are the benefits. Yeah, it's not as expensive, it's very easy to get started. Start and give it a try. So that's what we'll be doing for the years ahead.
Fantastic. Well, Winston, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been outstanding. Like I said, this was a masterclass on synthetic data right here. For those of you who have heard the term, don't know how to think about it, this is a great place to start in your self discovery process. So, Winston, I can't thank you enough for being here with me today. Um, so let me just end by saying that our next show is going to be on August 22nd, same time. My guest is going to be Michelle Robbins, who is the Senior Vice President of Vitamin Angels. It's a nonprofit. And we have Michelle and I actually have a pretty long history of our own where we're going to be talking about how we actually connected for the first time 20 plus years ago. And we'll be talking about the role of networking and personal branding and how does that help you in your professional career. So it's not going to be about AI or synthetic data, but we're going to talk about professional networking. And it's a good story. I think it's a bit of a heartwarming story as well. And Michelle will be the one who will be sharing all of that stuff on the 22nd. So thanks everyone for joining. Thanks again, Winston, for being here. Really appreciate your time. And I'll see everybody on the 22nd.